Great. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. My name is Michael Matos. I'm the Education Technology Director for an organization called Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition. I'm also your COIB representative for Region 3, and it's a pleasure being here. I have put in the chat, that is the Zoom chat, 3 different links. One of the links is for this particular presentation, so you can open that up. I also have some QR codes for these too, in case you have a mobile device handy and you don't want to open up another tab on your current on your computer that you're using for the presentation. I also have a resource link, which I'll go into and show you a little bit more of, and a Jamboard link where hopefully we can have some other engagement outside of this presentation, where I'll be asking you some questions, and I'll go over that a little bit as well. Let me go to the second slide here. So before I do that, we're going to be talking about the Digital Learning Lab, and as it says, an innovative experiment building self-efficacy for teachers and learners in digital literacy and technology integration. So here are the QR codes and the links. And I will try to get to that annotation tab and see if I can delete the little red line there. But it's really not bothersome right now. You should still be able to take a picture of that QR code and work through that. So the first QR code works with the presentation link up at the top, the middle one with the resource link down at the bottom, and the Jamboard one with right under it for the Jamboard link. Okay, so the presentation link, I'm not going to go over that because that's obviously what we're on right now, but that's got all the links and all the information that if you want to go into it in detail. I would ask, as I see that there's still a few of you coming in, please go ahead in the chat, in the Zoom chat, and introduce yourselves, say hello with name and the organization you're with, and it's a pleasure having you all here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Jamboard link. So I'm going to click on the link, same link that I have in the Zoom chat. And hopefully it will open it up there. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, the slides are up here at the top, just to the right of the title of this Jamboard. And all the tools that you'll need to use are over on the left. There is the pen that you can write with. There's an eraser that will erase that, a selection tool, a sticky note, which is my preferred method of sharing, and hopefully yours as well, using a sticky note and being able to post with your favorite color on here, and then you just move it into the playground there, right? Another option that you can use is to upload pictures or a URL code that has those pictures, Google Images, something from Google Drive, Google Photos. You can even use your camera, which is a great way for students to say hi right there. And as you can see here, a quick picture of myself with a green, my green screen in the back there. And of course, you can easily delete all of these as well. You have a text box that you can write in, and I missed the shapes here, and you can add information to those shapes. And then of course you have your laser pointer where you can work with other information as well. Okay, so just to go over some of these questions real quick. The first question, a very general question, what is one word that would describe how you felt, or how instructors, if you're an administrator or other colleagues, felt when you had to teach remotely during the pandemic? I know that was sprung on us pretty quickly, and we're still trying to fit in, right? Emotional well-being is just as important for instructors as it is for learners. What ways has your organization accomplished this? And then the rest of the questions are actually examples of questions that we have for our educator efficacy survey that we give at the beginning of the project year and then at the end of the project year. And the first few questions are on confidence, they're yes, no, or maybe answers. I have 2 of those. And then some examples of professional development needs where it's either gauged as a high priority, some need, or a low priority. And I will discuss these a little bit more with some examples, but please work on this Jamboard, try it out. It's anonymous. And that's what's great as a tool to engage students. And go ahead, put in your responses. This Jamboard stays open even after the presentation. So if you want to go back and look at it and see some of the responses from others, and please stay engaged. And I will have reminders throughout the presentation. Hey, go back, check out the Jamboard. This question is on there. See if you can engage. Okay. And so if there's any questions on this, please go ahead and put those in the chat. And or if you're having some difficulty opening this or anything like that, let me know. We could easily work with that. Okay, so let's get started here with the presentation. I'm going to put up the QR code screen real quick again. And all right, so here we go. Let me just go back there one more time just to make sure that everyone was able, if they want to use a QR code, they're able to take a picture here and save these links. Okay, so here we go. So the problem. So we looked at this digital literacy and technology integration and where we were at, and this was way before the pandemic, and we looked at how can we deliver learning through technology, right? And wherever someone can have access to this. So over 20% of our population has a limited skills in reading, writing, math, or English proficiency. And digital tools offer the promise to improve the effectiveness and reach of adult education. For many, adult education is the most accessible and affordable avenue for mobility. But in today's economy, continual learning and critical thinking skills are crucial for success. Now, US-wide, 32 million adults are not digitally literate, and this makes up US adults who do not have the sufficient comfort or competence, right, to do what we do on a regular basis, right? Things like find a recipe, make retail purchases, search for a job, file taxes online, or read an article online and continue learning online, right? Over 80% of our adult education learners have less than basic computing skills. Yes, they might have a lot of navigational skills through their phones, right, or other digital devices, but that doesn't mean that they actually have production learning computing skills that help them to be able to use this at a work environment or just for everyday life skills. So the outlook, we looked at developing communities of inquiry. We looked at developing communities of learning. We looked at peer-to-peer learning. We looked at, as we develop these communities, how do we take action and building these action cohorts. We looked at educator and learner tech efficacy. We looked at experimenting and employing new tech skills and digital resources and breaking down digital equity and inclusion gaps. So this is what I'd like to get across today. And then, of course, let you know that these communities of inquiry, these communities of learning, this peer-to-peer learning, these action cohorts, right? All of this stuff can take place in groups of 3 to groups of hundreds. You could develop this within your own program, your region, your state, and even nationally, where we have these communities where we share obstacles, we share successes, we experiment, and we put into action. I'd like to, before I go on, give special thanks to some of our Digital Learning Lab subject matter experts, which we have 5 of them, Joy Pack, Jennifer Madrell, and David Rosen, and one of our participant educators, Colleen Stribling, who gave me some information and shared some of their thoughts for this presentation that I will share with you. Okay, so a quick reminder, the Jamboard, and that's the first question on our Jamboard. So if you want to start putting in those sticky notes with your examples, that's the second question, I should say, on the Jamboard. The first question is, just give me that feeling you had when everything changed, right? And still changing. Some of the core elements for the Digital Learning Lab, which is the entire name is the Illinois Digital Learning Lab, though I have shared this project nationally many times in many different states and conferences, and just to look at the structure and how, if needed, this could be mimicked. So some of the core elements: support for adult educators in effectively incorporating learning technology, and the subject matter experts and the curated resources that we deliver to the participants in their programs help with this. A facilitated learning community for educators and administrators. They support, advise, and learn from each other. And they look at resources that they find valuable and test and find and put together best practices. Capturing insight about the most effective digital tools, delivery models, support strategies, and that could be shared across the state, and as we see with this presentation, across the country. Participating educators act as entrepreneurs. They research digital tools, they experiment, right, with all these technologies. Their intent is to, our intent, the program's intent is to reimagine their roles as innovators. So the educators become innovators. They become technology advocates. The setup, real quick, our cohort and our setup changes year to year. This is the most participants we've had with the most organizations in 1 year. We have reached out in this is our 4th year. We have worked with almost 70 different organizations and almost 100 different participants throughout the state. The educators, they meet in small cohorts. There's 30 of them. There's 5 cohorts with 6 educators in each. Each cohort is led by a subject matter expert. There are 3 sprints, as we call them, and the sprint is really just a time, right? Each sprint is 3 to 4 months. What we do at the end of these sprints is we analyze the hypothesis, the goals, and the metrics that we had throughout that sprint. Each cohort and the participants in the cohort come up with a hypothesis, which could be a cohort hypothesis, and they could also have individual hypotheses, as well as a cohort goal, as well as individual program goals, and then the metrics to follow up with those goals. After each sprint, they can be reevaluated. If goals were supported and the hypothesis was supported, they may want to change it. Subject matter experts, they support the cohorts, they help guide through the experimentation process. Some of the metrics that we covered, and these are just examples. Obviously, they were quantitative and qualitative, and the is, as you can see here, the frequency of technology use and how it was self-reported, and the keyboarding and the qualitative words per minute, the quantitative words per minute, that is, and then just some of these others. And what we saw that was very interesting throughout the years, we have at least 3 or 4 organizations that can actually prove that class attendance rates improved, and hours online or hours in class working on it with a digital device has actually improved. And this was all quantitative. And then just some other comfort surveys. We work with a lot of surveys, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of the other metrics as we go through this and look at some of the surveys that were developed by the participants. Once again, Jamboard, the next question that's on there, take a look at it. Let me hear your responses. All right, let me continue here. So the IDLL, they have developed technology integration leaders who could support future professional development at local levels or regional levels and state levels. And we've even had new national presenters because of this project, and really getting their presentation feet wet throughout the events that we have year round for the Digital Learning Lab. We supported educators and learners in reaching curricular and individual goals, and then we helped adult learners become more confident in using technology both within and beyond the classroom. So as you go through the Jamboard, look at some of those professional development questions, because that is a big part of this project, and making sure that we have enough professional development opportunities. And we try to find those out there which are mostly free or completely free. And that's both at a state level and at a national level to meet the needs, especially those high priority needs of the instructors and administrators that are in this program. A little bit with some pictures, just to tell you, as you can see, that is the Digital Learning Lab in action. That was pre-COVID, from our first 2 to 3 years, 2 years, I should say. And you can see here a lot of networking. There is normally in upwards of 500 learners directly involved with our Digital Learning Lab project throughout the state of Illinois. There is normally at least 25 to 30 participants, not including the 5 subject matter experts. And these participants, whether they're instructors or administrators, they bring in colleagues. So we normally have almost 50 instructors and administrators participating directly in the project as well every year. I put this together with the pre-COVID, because I did go out to every single organization throughout the state, and our state is very long, so it could be a 9-hour drive from one organization to the other. And these programs appreciate this material and how to set it up and how to use it to support their hypothesis and support their goals, and look at some metrics that actually meet the support for those goals. So these are the some of the resources that we delivered, some of the tech tools, and that I even helped set up in some of these organizations. Some of the other looking at metrics and using particular devices. These are just some of the listed devices. Maybe some of the pictures you might not have seen in the last picture. The last graphic was the swivels or the owls or the Elmo document cameras with the interactive display and room control systems and so on. These are coming into use more and more every day. I'm ordering these almost every other week for these organizations that are putting in the whole process of trying to deliver instruction hybrid. whether it is a blended learning or a flex learning. They need the tools to be able to deliver this flawlessly for those in class and those out of class. So this is my picture from the COVID from 2020 to present. Obviously, we still continued to meet. We still had over 500 students participating, learners participating, and about 50 instructors and administrators participating throughout the whole year and throughout the whole state. So here's obviously a lot of virtual meetings. So just a little bit about how we're thinking about how do we support our programs and how do we support our instructors. So supporting a real-time student engagement so they can go and develop these engagements for their learners. And looking at the analysis, you know, where we are. We were evaluating this before COVID. We're evaluating it after COVID. We've had this real-time engagement way before COVID, and we continue to build on it. And our goals, where do we need to be? And our plan and our strategies and our resources are constantly changing as we experiment and use and develop best practices and go back and meet obstacles. My executive director, as we normally had presentations in person, and we met throughout the state in different areas where we had these communities of learning in person, as well as our monthly Zoom meetings. And we always had, you know, our potluck. We always had our greeting hugs, and we looked at it, and a quote from my executive director was, you know, we thrived on hugs and potlucks. What do we do now? So we started to think about this in groups, and how do we plan for what we wanted, right? This technology, you know, all-encompassing direction. So how do we look at this? So we had 97% of administrators transitioned at least some services to distant format. This was after the pandemic. Before the pandemic, it was half of that, right? Instructors who had never taught online before moved classes online. That was 70%. You can see the quote there from the administrator. So we looked at that for starters. As we continued our project, because remember, our project was way before the pandemic. Our student engagement, as we looked at that, we looked at COVID-19 as heightened socioeconomic inequalities and so on. And we saw that lower socioeconomic status, you know, that self-identified number was 11%. The higher socioeconomic status was 48% in this engagement. Obviously, the equity and inclusion had to be worked on a little bit more than we had already started with before the pandemic. We obviously found the good news in this, that online teaching and learning has been studied for decades. So there's already numerous researches and studies and theories. You could actually find planning for hybrid and these flex learning models and blended learning. You could find written articles on this all the way back to 2011. So there's a lot of information there. And I think I've even read of very similar hybrid models from 2009. So it was already out there. Effective online learning results from careful instructional and design and planning were already there. So that's the great news. So we had something to work with. And that was what we've been working with from the start before the pandemic. And so we put together this framework, the community of inquiry. So we had a teaching presence, we had a cognitive presence, we had a social presence. How do we put that together to bring back that idea of hugs and potluck, right? So the cognitive presence, right? Learners engage with instructional content. The teacher presence, learners engage with the instructor, and the social presence, learners engage with each other. We looked at that. So we looked at the cognitive presence, and our initial focus, right? That was what we needed to do. Learners engage with the instructional content. We saw this as our start, right? So we saw other digital materials. We're at 24% for ABE, and ELL was 34%. The publisher online curriculum we saw there was 9%, and then non-digital materials, huge, right? 67% for ABE, ASC, and then ELL was 57%. So we looked at, how do we bring this up? How do we continue to gather as a group and to work as a group when we might not be able to continue the in person, where the potluck comes in, right? So cognitive presence, learners engage with instructional content, huge, right? We need to leverage quality digital resources for adult ed, and this is obviously one of the main project criteria. So we looked at what about those hugs and potluck, and we looked at the teacher presence and the social presence. So learners engage with the instructor and learners engage with each other. So how do we use that at a distance, that virtual learning, and then later bring this into the hybrid learning so we can continue that? We saw the change, right? We saw the teacher and the social presence with the synchronous groups from 24% for ABE and ASE to the 33% in ELL. And then we saw the increase in asynchronous, or 50-50 online or not, as you can see those increases there. We looked at the goals for IDLL. So what implications is this for IDLL, the Digital Learning Lab? So 70% instructors who had never taught online before moved to classes online. Remember, we mentioned that, huge. It's a need for professional development to foster teaching and social presence. So we saw that the need for the resources and be able to test the resources. We saw the need for the professional development. Now, remember, we have been working with all of this before the pandemic, and now we saw that this was proof to what we were doing, and now we were going to continue this and build on it, and that's what we're still doing. Once again, Jamboard, and the next question on there is another professional development question, and I'm going to just, okay, we saw IDLL creates environments to help support instructors and administrators from different areas of adult education. And you can see there, right? We help instructors connect with one another. We have instructors collaborating even outside of our scheduled cohort meetings, by phone, by text, their own set up Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets, from the west side of Chicago down from a community-based organization that has maybe 12 to 20 students, with a community college at the bottom end of our state in the Shawnee National Forest, the Shawnee Community College, where they engage and continue conversation. And this was one of the main ideas of this project, is to break down those silos that every state has. So to bring these organizations working together for one cause, and that is to support each other and collaborate. We also looked at efficacy. So how do we build tech efficacy for both the participants, which are educators and administrators, and our learners? And we continue to do this, engaging this once again through surveys. And this is a really nice video on the wisdom of geese and talking about efficacy. I'm going to try to play it. Hopefully everyone can hear it.
There's a lot we can learn about teamwork from a rather surprising source. When geese migrate, they form a V shape. Whilst it looks pretty, it also has some important functions in terms of working as a group. When flying in a V formation, each member of the team creates an uplift for the team member behind. This team effort makes the flight of the whole group more efficient. If a goose breaks free from the V shape, it will immediately have to make more effort to keep up. So working in a team towards the same destination means less effort needs to be made as an individual. And the same goose doesn't always lead the V shape. Leadership rotates so that the burden of flying in front is shared. Again, this makes the whole flock more efficient. The geese flying behind encourage the front geese to keep up their speed by honking. This communication affects the whole team, and their positive feedback makes the whole team more successful. Lastly, if a goose gets sick and falls out of formation, 2 others will stay with it until it is well enough to join another flock. The team cares for one another, as a loss to the flock is a loss for all of them. So, to recap, working as a team is more efficient than working alone. Leadership can be shared for greater efficiency and to spread the burden. Communication with the whole team is important. Giving encouraging feedback promotes success, and having empathy for team members is always better than taking a selfish approach.
So we work with the wisdom of geese, and we form our communities that way. And I'll show you our website in a few minutes that has a step-by-step on how to develop your own community of learning, your own community of inquiry, your action cohorts, no matter how small or how big this program or your participants are, how many colleagues you have. It goes a long way within your organization. Let me go past this. And okay, so real quick, I just wanted to show you some of the instructor and staff self-efficacy surveys that we took. And I'm going to take you into some of the results here. So looking at, we first asked, as you see some of the examples in the Jamboard, we asked questions on confidence. So our first questions were summarizing the participant confidence, and this is the instructors or the administrators that participate in the project. And you see that confidence all around was relatively high. As you can see from some of these results, and this was one of our pre-surveys. And then we asked professional development needs. And as you can see here, we looked at professional development needs, and we asked to rate them as a low, high, or already skilled. And then you can see the red is high priority for professional development. So we looked at a lot of these, and we started to arrange our professional development for the year. As working for the organization that I work for, Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition, we developed our own series of professional development. I reached out to colleagues throughout the country and put together professional developments that we call lab notes. Through the different professional development channels in our state, we made sure that we were in the know about when they had professional development opportunities, especially those that fit into those high priority needs. And then we also looked at nationally, and we continue to put these out on our website, on all our social media platforms, and then of course, as we meet monthly in our separate cohorts as well. So these professional development needs can be met. I can tell you that we had let's see here, an average, I thought I had it written on here. We had an average of the high priority need at 72%. When we went back and did a post survey, we had brought down those high priority needs to 58%, which we thought we met a lot of those high priorities, and then we were able to work with the participants to be able to meet those high priority needs. I also have some of the learner pre and post technology. So these are just examples in English and Spanish. You can look at that. Obviously, the shared link for this presentation, which I'll also send for the app as well. We'll have these links and you can look at them a little more. I do have some results here that I can share as a summary of results. We normally have over 500 students respond. This was something that I put together just to give you of what happened towards the end of last year. This was around June, and there was more responses by the end of July. We started these with an average of like 71%, almost 72%. And as you can see how this average increased, where we have averages here of about 94 to 95%. And these were all student responses as they responded to our surveys. Our student surveys, different from our educator surveys, which go out pre and post at the beginning and end of the project year. The student surveys go out at the beginning of each term, and we just made into 3 terms throughout the year. At the beginning of the each term and at the end of each term, these surveys go out. We try to match the names. We only ask for first name and some other identifying features, and then we try to match with a pre and post to get a about usually over 500 that we can match and have pre and post scores for. Some of the resources we use, and of course there's so many more. These were the resources that were used the most of last year up to the end of July. And then of course, all our programs, we currently have 59 programs that use our North Star network that we supply for all of those in the Digital Learning Lab project, as well as throughout our coalition of organizations in our state. Here I've got the 32 organizations that were directly related with IDLL, the Illinois Digital Learning Lab. And this is a snapshot from late June. We looked at how can we start to increase outreach. And of course, this was something that we did before the pandemic, and it's something we reevaluated, got back into our groups, talked about what is the best way to reach out. We looked at an outreach mode. We communicated with learners between class meetings and or assignments. How do we do that? And we some of the top 3 were talking points, WhatsApp, and Remind, to use that with our students. We also looked at that social presence, right? That synchronous live video conferencing. What can we use out there? We can Zoom and Google Meets and Microsoft Teams. And we explored all these. We looked at the emotional support, those emotional needs and engaging with the curriculum. We looked at, show your faces, let's talk, breakout groups, let's meet, let's use other engagement tools for pictures and other thoughts, and to keep you engaged and responding. Tools like the Jamboard that we're using now, or Nearpod, or Mentimeter, or Edpuzzle, or Flipgrid, or Miro. Less can be more. Reduce lengthy live class time and replace it with asynchronous engagement. And this worked as well. This took that place of that looking at the hugs and the potluck, right? We looked at other resources, right? Especially videos. And of course, YouTube has a number of them, as well as some other sites. We looked at the Teacher Talk Tool Parade, which is a real popular one with many of our instructors. If you get a chance, look at this. I'm not going to play the video because I really wanted to go into this part. The very important part of the project is selecting resources to support learning, with technology. How did we do that? What was our our approach for that. And technology integration, we looked at two approaches. We looked at lead with technology or the resource, as you can see here, over to the learning, right? And then lead with the learning experience to that technology and the resource. So we looked at these two approaches. We also looked at an instructional phases, right? The warm-up, the presentation, the practice. And then we looked at our engagement approaches, learner and instructor. So the learners engage with the instructor of the lesson. We looked at the learners engage with other learners during the lesson. Okay, and then we looked at the learner and content. Learners engage with the instructional materials.
Michael, there is a question. What are some of the asynchronous practices of engagement?
So that's what I'm getting to here. So we'll show you some of the resources that we use for asynchronous as well as synchronous. I saw that. Thank you so much. Keep using the chat and asking questions, and we'll get to it hopefully. Instructional phases. So we had the warm-up, the presentation, and the practice. And then we had our engagement approaches. So remember how we set this up, right? We have the learner and learners, learner and instructor, and learner and content. So we have the instructional phases in the columns and in the rows, and the learner engagement approaches in the columns. Then we looked at, let's start looking for those resources. Let's start looking for, especially those asynchronous resources, right? And start to develop, what resources are we going to go after? What resources are we going to start experimenting with? But obviously we needed this process to pick the best ones. So as you can see here, we looked at what learning activities, tools, and skills to be practiced. And this is just an example, okay? And you can see that many of these can be used synchronous or asynchronous, depending on how you've got it set up for your class. Another great tool that we use is, if you have not had a chance to look at this site, this is a great site, toptoolsforlearning.com, and I will take you to that site. And once again, you can find some great ideas here for synchronous and asynchronous learning with your students later on their own. Okay, there's a comment, struggling. You have any suggestions? We are primarily using one-on-one instruction, okay? And I do have a lot of suggestions. Let me get to that in 1 minute. Great question. So this is a great tool. As you can see, they have their top 300 tools for learning in 2021 already posted on here, right? And as you can see, they have the PL stands for personal learning, and WL stands for workplace learning. ED stands for tools for education. And as you can see, they have links to these tools. They have a brief description of the tools, where they placed, and then the analysis of the tools. And it's just a great site. You have an idea of what to use, or maybe you saw it in some presentation, and you have the time now to incorporate another resource. You want to add something else to your curriculum. You're teaching something different. So you want to go in here. Here's a great place to start looking at that, and then start exploring what you can do with this resource. So I'm going to go back here. And remind you about the Jamboard and the next professional development question on there. And then I just wanted to go real quick before I go to a research page. I've got about 10 minutes here. looking at one of our instructors and her success with her class, the participants in the project, the instructors and the administrators, developed these report out presentations during our midpoint meeting and then again at our final meeting. We tried to make our launch, our midpoint, and our final event throughout the state. We have like 2 or 3 events. This was when it was in person. Now that we're doing it online, we were having one event, obviously online, at these midpoints and at the launches, at the midpoints, and at the final events. Many of the participants present a whole presentation on their project and how things went, the obstacles, successes, resources used, and so on. They even bring student testimonials, and in some cases it brought students live when we've had the live meetings, and the students have talked about their experiences. But here's one example from instructor Colleen Stribling. So my focus, that's her focus class and her experience with the lab and how many students she had and what levels they were in. And then the classroom technology that was used as well. And we have funding that we give to each one of these participants and their program to buy some of this technology, as I mentioned earlier. And that's where that technology, we work on it with the cohort subject matter experts to make sure the technology that they're buying leads to the hypothesis support and the goals and the metrics and so on. So some of the resources that were used. We also develop partnerships with many of these publishers like Burlington English or New Readers Press, IXL, to try to encourage them to help us with the resources, as in return, we report out of those things that worked in this project. And as you can see here, some of the lab experiences and, you know, where the language learners in her class came from. And these report outs are great because we learn about each other in these communities, as well as, you know, some of the stories as we see here, some of the lessons learned, and, you know, where some more lessons learned, and, you know, how they're building that village with that whole surrounding theme of digital literacy and technology integration, and how do they see that strengthening their classes. And everyone had unexpected outcomes, which is great. And this is what happens with projects where we're sharing. I have a number of IDLL takeaways, which I'm going to leave for you to look at. What I want to do right now is to actually go to our IDLL website, where I can show you a lot of those resources that were mentioned here. Let me see if I can find it here. Here we go. So hopefully everyone can see that. So this is our resource page. We have a complete Illinois Digital Learning Lab page, which is free. And I did put the link to this resource at the beginning. It's also in your presentation as a link. So we have a number of resources on our resource page, as you can see here. And it's everything you need out there, where let me pull one up here real quick. I'm going to go over to Google Classroom Apps and click on that. So all of these have a Google Doc, which has the name of the resource, the link to the resource, and a summary of that resource. And then basically what you can do here, these have all been vetted, by the way. They've been used by instructors successfully. They're completely free, or at least a good part of it that you can use is free. The links themselves are checked twice a year. The last time we checked them, all of them, and there's thousands of them, was at the end of May, and of course we eliminated those. There's 9 pages here of Google Classroom apps, and these are apps that work with Google Classroom seamlessly, and they're things that you can incorporate into your Google Classroom and take that, use that as a platform. So we have a lot of these on here. We've also worked with an organization called Crowded Learning and helped build their digital library. As you can see here, we have a link to that on this page. When they have a number of things and activities that work directly with publisher material. We've also asked our participants throughout the years to, within our lesson template, to donate template lessons. And as you can see here, we have a number of lessons and we keep adding to these. And once again, this is all free. It's open to the public to go ahead in there and use what you want, however you see fit. And so all of those are in there as well. Take a look at it. This is our homepage for the project. So I'm just going to take you in the next couple minutes through the rest of the site here. The link to the site is there. Once you go on the resource page, it takes you to everywhere. As you can see, our community of learning is large, but you can have a small community of learning and still develop all of these opportunities for your students. Okay. I mentioned earlier about, we also have a page in here and within the home page here, as you can see, there is a process on how to put together your own community of learning with your action cohorts and so on. And it doesn't really talk about size, it just talks about how to put this together. And if we look at our lab note series, and this is the professional development series that we put together, we have 4 to 6 of these per year, and we put all the recordings here and so on. And as you can see, some of the past ones here with all that information, which is more professional development, because you can go back and look at this. We continue to put every year, as you can see here, this is all our events that happen throughout the year. If you look here for 2019 and 2020, there's a lot more professional development here as well, with the slides of all of the professional development that was delivered by the participants, as well as the recordings. So that's all here too. And there's just a lot of things to learn from the successes of some of these great presentations by past and current presenters. And I'm not sure why it should give you access once you go to the link. And it's just a number of continued learning, including our field reports, which also have other resources and other use. How did we use VR headsets and hand controls to teach writing? How did we use Google Minis and Alexa smart speakers to teach math? You know, and that's all in there and reported on. And I think if you have time, take a look through the site and reach out to me if you have any questions as well. After this, I will put my email in the chat.
Can you also put the link to the presentation again and make sure you put it on your session in Whova? I feel like we need to do a half day or a full day webinar with you. There's so much information here. It's just overwhelming. It's awesome resources. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, it is a project that we are constantly building throughout. This is our 4th year, as I mentioned. So there is definitely a lot of information.
Yeah, so we might have you come back for your own special day with just Michael Matos on a Friday or something. It's been, I have to actually copy the presentation link myself because I wanted to. So
yeah, there's the presentation link. And we continue to build on what we're doing. Right now, we're focusing on, because this was a 2-year project, so the cohorts got to know each other even better during the first year. So now we've actually put in certain topics or theme where we're looking at other resources and other tools to use with those resources, as well as looking at mainly ESL resources for synchronous and asynchronous work. And then our last theme that we're looking at is the model, the delivery model? Is it hybrid? And if it's hybrid, is it a blended learning? Is it flex? Is it hyperflex? And we're looking at experimenting with all of that within the different organizations that are in the project.
So I would recommend anyone who has more questions or their question wasn't specifically answered to maybe reach out to Michael via email. It is 10:30. I am going to stop the recording now.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And